Dry Cleaning Department of Oklahoma State University, Technical Branch in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, would like to welcome Mrs. Dorothy Bennet to the campus. For many years, Mrs. Bennet has been Mrs. Oklahoma Dry Cleaner. She has kept abreast of fibers, fabrics, and styles of clothing, and in this capacity has worked with individual dry cleaners, Oklahoma State University, retailers, consumers, fabric and garment manufacturers, state and federal legislators, the Better Business Bureau, and the Oklahoma Small Claims Court, furthering all of them in the knowledge of garment construction and maintenance. Today she will share some of her knowledge with us. Ms. Bennet?
Thank you, Everett. It's always a pleasure to come and visit the Oklahoma State Tech campus. I have been going to most of the universities in Oklahoma for about 25 years. And the dry cleaning industry to me is a fascination because we're dealing with some of the oldest arts known to man. Your dyeing and your printing. And then, of course, we know that people's clothing, when they select it, it is something that they really enjoy, and they don't really want too much criticism of their tastes. When it comes into the dry cleaning business, we don't dare say, well, that old rag may or may not look very good. We're going to be dealing with mostly negatives today because we're going to be teaching students. So we want them to realize the combinations of fabrics, dyes, trims. Our greatest problem is trims. The designer will make a garment, and then she'll stick some different types of findings on it that will not dry clean very well. So usually if they can be removed, we'll remove them, but if not, sometimes a garment becomes unserviceable and cannot yield to any kind of a soil removal treatment. So we're going to start with a lot of examples that I have here and tell you the problems with them and how they could have been avoided or maybe not avoided. So we'll start with this little garment. This is quite famous little garment. About 10 or 15 years ago it came on the market, and it had a combination of two different types of fabrics. The vinyl will not dry clean, and the wool will not wet clean or wash. And then the dye was not soluble, so it will fade. So we had a garment here that was, at that time is about $5 or $6. And then one dry cleaner said, oh yeah, we've cleaned thousands of them. Well, she didn't bother to say they just dipped it in a bucket in petroleum solvent. It will clean once or twice in petroleum solvent, but eventually it takes the plasticizer out of the sleeve and it will become stiff and hard. Now, we don't have this problem as much as we used to. There is a dry cleanable vinyl available to us, and if the garment says dry cleanable, generally speaking, it will dry clean. But we have had garments that will not. They'll turn stiff and hard just the same as this one is. So it depends on the manufacturer, and this is a manufacturer's problem, but our dry cleaner must have dialogue at the counter and say, we will take this at customer risk because we have had some problem with this type of vinyl. So we'll leave that one and go to another. The bond garments came out about 10 years ago, and we thought it was something the dry cleaning industry was doing wrong. It was not. These two garments, in order to achieve a drapable garment, they used an adhesive to glue a nylon tricot to a crepe or to a wool. The crepe never made a good bond without any kind of adhesive, but the wool jersey did. So, but when it went through the dry cleaning, it was soluble in dry cleaning fluid and it turned loose. Therefore, we had an unserviceable garment. Well, we thought it was the dry cleaner's fault, but it was not. Our analysis lab and International Fabric Care Institute in Silver Springs, Maryland, run tests on them. Then the manufacturers cooperated very well with us, and now we have a very serviceable bond, and they are guaranteed for life. So whenever you buy one, your department store will guarantee that that is serviceable. Now we'll go to the coated garments. Your velvets, your corduroys, any pile garment. Now you know that is going to be woven on the top of the service, so it isn't going to be as serviceable as a regular weave and loom woven. But the problem with this, it's an acetate velvet, and you never want to get wet in it, because once you get wet or steam and you put a fingerprint there, that thumbprint will stay forever. Now, this young lady made this at home, and she pressed it at home with a steam iron. Then she brought it to a professional dry cleaner to have it serviced. And it was already, the pile was already damaged when we received it. But she felt like that it was our fault. And since she was a student, this was her first garment, we did pay her, we bought her new material so she could go back and make another jacket. But it really isn't the fault. You have, you wear it once and you press it very carefully and keep it dry. You can put it on the steaming Susie, but you want to walk away and leave it an hour till it's thoroughly dry before you even touch it. So this is a garment that needs excellent care. We have an unusual problem here with the corduroys. It's a pile garment also. And this corduroy, these pants, the manufacturer has made them in two different, they've run one weave one way and one weave the other. And therefore, in the light reflection, you can see it. And it really should be a seconds in corduroy manufacture. And it'll show up in the dry cleaning. And we're showing it up here. You can see the light and dark. When you reverse it the other way, it will turn, and you can see the different aspect of it. So whenever you get a corduroy garment into a plant, you want to take a good look and be sure that the corduroy fabric is going the same direction. Our knits have been a problem for several years. Angora wool is a very fragile hair. And really about the only thing you can do is handle it without any agitation and squeeze it out because of the fact that it will shrink, it will felt, and we clean them all the time. But any good dry cleaner knows how to handle them and take care of them. But this one was felted and too much mechanical action and too long a run. But we will take Angora at customer risk most of the time because you never can tell the content of the garment. Now, the content of the garment is something important we should take up right now. There's a new care labeling law. Used to, for years, it said dry clean or washable. If it said that, you could assume if it was washable, it was dry cleanable. You can't assume that anymore. All the manufacturer has to do to put on there is washable. And you cannot assume that it's dry cleanable. So you have to take that with a grain of salt, or some plants take them at customer risk if they can't tell. But most of us, professional people, that know the content of a fabric, if we know the content in the fabric, then we know how to service it. But you must, at the marketplace, when you buy your clothing, you really need to read your labels and see if it has a soil removal service within your budget allowance. Because many times you assume you're going to wash it, and it isn't washable, it's dry cleanable because of the dye, because of the trims. So this is where I have my students in the universities that are in home economics classes pay particular attention when they make a garment or sew one, that they do pay particular attention to the trims and also the threads. Thread sometimes shrinks and creates a problem in those garments. Our next problem with knit, now this was a size 5 when the woman knitted. Now you know you need that label again. This was an Orlon. And of course in some of the plants we do have some finishers that think they know a little bit more than other people. So the young lady brought it in and says, I don't really know. Had it been wool, it would have just pressed up and been fine. But being Orlon, and she took it back and put it on what we call the Steamin' Susie and shot the steams to it, and so now it's a size 42. The heat has killed it. There is no way we can re-shrink this. Now in your woolen garments, if they shrink some, we can usually get an inch and a half in blocking them out. But if you block them this way, they're going to come up this way. So be very careful of heat. Heat is the natural enemy of all your man-made fibers, and too wet a steam or too dry a steam or too high a steam can affect your wool garments. And you will remember that, not to felt your wool garments. These are some samples we took several years ago. And going back to the vinyl coat, this is a vinyl, but a young lady in a fabric house bought it and was going to make a coat of it. And she was going to line it with a silk lining, with a millium lining. Well, millium lining is quite expensive. And so I said, well, let me take a sample of it, and I'll take it home, and we'll see how it is. Well, it was vinyl. So I said, go ahead and make your coat, but let's just get a washable crepe lining, and then it will go through the washing machine, and you can take care of it yourself. So it's really important that you know the fiber content of what you're purchasing. This is a polyurethane coated, and we don't have these anymore. They were so unserviceable. Before they got to the cleaning plant, all of the coating was wearing off the buttonholes, the belt, the buckles, across the shoulders, and then when it went through the cleaning, it just accentuated it. So many of your coated fabrics are really not serviceable. Now, there's an ultra suede coat on the market, and it's an excellent buy. It'll clean very well. But there's a coated suedes, and the Heek suedes, they have all types of trade names. And they will start peeling around the sleeves and wherever there's a double thickness, because they're glued on, and wherever anything in my house that's glued on, it's always going to come unglued sometime or other, even myself. So you really want to be careful of what you're buying. I had a person come in with a coat the other day. He thought he had an ultra suede coat. And I asked him what he paid for it. He said $59. I said, sir, you don't have an ultra suede coat. I said, let's rip the lining, and showed him the tricot that it was glued to. So you can always tell an ultra suede from a Heek suede. But it's surprising to me that many of the clerks in the department stores don't realize this. This is my big laugh getter in my universities. Very few people really know what it is. It's a black fake caracal coat, and it was glued on. It was bought, it's a nice lining, but the problem here is the same thing, soluble adhesive that the man used to glue his pattern on with. When it went into the dry cleaning machine, it came out wrapped around about 25 pounds of clothing. And of course, the dry cleaner had hysterics, and the dry cleaner had the heart attack, and the women had hysterics. But there was not anything that the cleaner could do, because the glue adhesive was soluble in dry cleaning fluid, and therefore we have an unserviceable garment. Now, we have had a recurrence of those in recent years of shawl collars. And one cleaner had his alteration woman sit and stitch that back on because she could follow the pattern. And she spent 2 days at $6 an hour remaking a shawl collar that the manufacturer had put out unserviceable. But that's the way we do. We do give our customer service a lot of times. Let's take proper storage. Silk garments. This one has a discoloration. I don't know whether that's going to be picked up or not. But the sunlight and fluorescent lights will do this to silk garments particularly, and to many other types of fabrics. Even your man-made fibers will also suffer this kind of a damage. Your man-made fibers used to suffer this damage from gas exposure from floor furnaces or open gas heat in a home. But we are into a silk era right now. So when you have your silk dresses, and the department stores especially, we have had so many problems with them when they put them in the window under the fluorescent lights. The damage starts there. So you want to examine these type of clothing when they come into your cleaning plant very, very closely, because you will note the damage then. This happens also to sweaters on mannequins. I had sweaters coming from a department store, 3 of them, and right across the shoulders she was fading. So I went out to the department store, and she has a mannequin there, but she's displaying her sweaters, and a 350 candle light spotlighting it. And she said, well, I have 3 more back in the back. And I said, well, Nancy, you can't do this. I just set it out from under the light, because the light will pull a color on any of the silks. And even when you wear a silk dress in July and August, as I had years ago, the hot sunlight took the color out of this one also. So you really, silk is a luxury fiber, and the dye in it sets on the surface. It does not penetrate like a cotton fiber or a wool fiber. But it's a continuous filament like your man-made fibers. So your dye sits on the surface. So anytime that it doesn't penetrate through to the center of the fiber, you're going to have dye problem before you use the garment up. This is another problem we have, is an imprint on the surface. Let's see if we have the belt here so that it will show. Let's try the belt. You see the pattern that has been flocked onto this belt. The same pattern was on the black dress all over in variable stages. We don't clean the belt because it was backed with vinyl and there was no way we could service the belt. But the dress we serviced, and all of the pattern came off because it was soluble in dry cleaning fluid. So you really, in making a purchase of this kind, or if it's coming through to be serviced, you certainly want to test to see if it's serviceable. Now, this is a spotting problem. A pigment print is a dye that sets on the surface. You can always determine a pigment print because it will not go through to the back. And when you're buying these, remember that if you get a stain or spot on that we have to use oily paint remover to remove it, we're going to remove your stripes. So a professional dry cleaner knows better than to do that. And he will be very carefully to use some other type of soil removal spotting fluid that will not damage your clothing. But this is a problem that belonged to the dry cleaner. He improperly spotted him. This is a problem that has just surfaced. I don't know whether you can see the holes in this or not. It's been around, I guess, a long time and looks just like a checkerboard. Your fiber is gone. This is a dye problem. It's an imported 100% cotton, and it has a sulfuric dye content. It won't happen every time. Then it reacts to an alkaline sour that we use in the commercial laundry that we do have to use to neutralize the detergents used in the commercial laundry. And you will have a dye loss or fiber loss of the certain types of, this was orangey red. Now we've had the blue and white happen, and we have had stripes happen, but it's all due to the same thing. It's a very, very fragile imported cotton, short letters, and then we have the dye problem that reacts. So if this happens to you, take it back to your department store and your dry cleaner, and we'll work with you in getting it replaced. Oh, we have the sequins. We have been through a sequin era. They're still good. We have the little hang down the beads that you can see on here. Now this just so happens, this one has been cleaned, cleans very well. But some sequins will not clean. They will curl, they will melt. Now we have had a garment in a plant or two. They tested the sequins on the front, didn't bother to test them in the back. They had used a different kind of sequin where these cleaned, these were a glutinous mass where they had dissolved in the dry cleaning fluid. So we always want to test your sequins and take very good care of them and give them special care when they come through our plant. They can be serviced very well, but some cannot. So you must remember to have dialogue at the counter when you have this type of a garment. Now, we had some bandstand uniforms, and we couldn't figure out why they were dying when they were stored. But this is a stretch mylar. They make bathing suits out of it and used it for several years. But then when it was cleaned and stored, then it died in the storage, and there's no stretch left. So now then, most band uniforms are made with a non-stretched mylar, and they work very well. There was about 36 of these that they had to change out because they were new, and we had an analysis run, and it was a stretched mylar, and the manufacturer that made these guaranteed them to the students. So the students got a new band uniform. We've just about reached the end of our negatives, and we want to tell you some positives. Now, this one is a negative again. It has an embossed pattern, and sometimes they're put on with a gelatin surface, and they're put under pressure, and then when the steam hits them or presses them, then you have no pattern. So you really want to test these before you make up a garment. It seems that this was a rainbow formal dress, and we lost all the pattern on the night the little girl was to make her debut. But we did manage to get the fabric, remake it, get her on the platform by 8 o'clock. This is another pigment, and we will have some dye loss around the hem. It'll turn white because, again, of the dye problem sitting on the surface. So when you're buying your garments, take a look at your double thicknesses, because this will happen lots of times before it goes into the cleaning plant. It will be because of wear, and the dye just doesn't adhere to the surface. Now, we usually 95% of all clothes will clean very well and service very well. Our biggest problems that we have to deal with are buttons, trims, putting a white garment, two colors together. Sometimes you need to test those and see that they will not fade before you sew a garment or before you buy one. We usually go with the 7 keys to fabric service. You must know your fiber, your yarn, fabric construction, dyeing and printing, special finishes, trims and decorations, and garment construction. But many times we have these raincoats, we have special finishes on many garments, and sometimes you will lose the special finishes, and in the case of the raincoats, you will have to have them they're not waterproof really, they're shower-proof, because unless it's a slick surface, actually slicker raincoat, there's just not many fabrics that will withstand a downpour of rain that's just been waterproofed. And so realize that when you buy a raincoat, this is what you're buying, and when it goes to the cleaners, have them to resurface it so that it will withstand showers. There's many chemical finishes that they use. Scotchgard is one to protect from soil service. We had one several years ago that would not, it was a soil protectant, but it didn't work very well, so it's off of the market now. But many of your chemical finishes in your permanent press, on spots and stains on permanent press now, your greases will enter your fiber, and as it cools, if it's hot, then you have got a permanent stain that no one can remove. Let's take up spots and stains now for a while. We have several methods of removing spots and stains. Now, sometimes it's impossible to remove a stain, but the first thing you want to do when you get a stain on your garment, if it's water soluble, you take a damp cloth and not water and saturate it, but just pat it dry. Then get it to your dry cleaner as soon as you can. The sooner he gets the stain, the better he probably will have a stain removal service. But you do need to have dialogue at the counter with this type of stain. Lipsticks, some are very easy to remove. Others that have an orangey dye or several types of dye are very difficult to remove. That's one thing that don't attempt at home. Sometimes people will attempt to remove a spot at home and make it much more difficult for your professional dry cleaner to remove, because he really doesn't know what you've used, and it will react to some of the stain removers that he might have. Ballpoint ink is another bad one. There's about 9,800 types of ballpoint ink. Now, one thing you don't want to do with ballpoint ink is put water on it. Water sets ballpoint ink. You see the old Papermate ad, as you're going under the water, it sets it. So you really should just leave it, take it to your dry cleaner, and let him handle it, and it's very easily handled at his establishment. Other stains, alcoholic beverages, your oranges, your lemons, lemon juice, and all of your water-soluble juices of that kind need to be removed on the wet side. And some of your other stains will have to be removed on the dry side, all of your greases and grease-based stains. But a lot of times you'll have two different stains. Chocolate milk, you will have a grease stain and you'll have a dye stain, and then you'll have the milk stain. Now, a lot of people say put milk on ink. Don't believe it. Milk is one of the hardest things that we can remove, really, professionally, and it needs to be taken care of right away before they go into the drying cycle. Milk is a factor in casing paint, and it will really dry up on you. So don't think milk is a very easy stain to take care of. Washable paint. Get it off. As soon as you get it on, you can get it. But if you let it set up and dry, it takes a long time to beat and break up the skim that forms on it. So let's take care of the washable paint just as soon as we can. Oily paints, oil-based paints, can be removed with your oily paint removers. But always take this idea that you are an amateur. Don't attempt to do your professional spotting at home. Let's take it into a professional dry cleaner who has all of the spotting materials that he needs to do a professional job. Now let's see. Blood. Blood is a stain that we need to handle professionally, quickly. And the old adage at home where you use cold water. Not bad if the fabric will withstand cold washing. If the dye is solid, then you can do it. But blood needs to be gotten out. It doesn't need to be dried. It needs to be taken to a professional cleaner as soon as possible. And if you're in a car wreck, and this is something I'm not sure about, that the blood that gets on your clothes from a car wreck is just almost impossible to move it sometimes if it is left very long. It's kind of a gruesome thing to think about, but this has happened several times that we cannot remove the blood from garments that have been on people that have been nearly died in a car wreck. Shall we break here for a second? We were talking about stains, and I want to give you 5 ways of removing stains. There's your solvent action, your lubrication, your chemical action, your digestion, and then mechanical action again. So in the solvent action, this occurs when one substance is dissolved in another substance. You dissolve your stain. Your lubrication is the physical action of lubrication, the same as you're washing your hands, using soap to remove dirt from your hands. Then chemical action is best understood in order to remove an iodine stain. A spotter will treat the stain with ammonia. This will result in the forming of an ammonium iodide, which is a colorless water-soluble substance that can easily be rinsed from the garment. Then digestion. Many stains require digestion for removal, such as our blood. But there's a lot of trade products using the dry cleaning plants that contain enzymic materials. We use an enzyme to change the chemical structure of your blood chemicals. I'm trying to think of the word that makes up these type things, and I'm losing it right now. But this is the way you change a substance with a chemical, and therefore making the stain easier to remove from the garment. Now then, your mechanical action is necessary to some degree in all 4. But in mechanical action, when you're removing spots, be sure you tamp. You don't brush. You don't break the light reflection. You don't scratch a stain with your fingernail. Now I'll tell you one thing that will remove blood stains if you're sewing a garment. And I tell most of my home economics students this. If you'll take a yard of white sewing thread and you moisten that in your mouth with the saliva, then you tamp that onto the blood stain. If it's a small one and you're sewing a garment and you prick your finger, the enzymic action in that blood, because this is a digester in your mouth, and it'll take the blood out. So we've been using that for years. It's just one of the little things that you can do to remove a stain easily. But there's a scientific background to it. Now, most of your stains you can identify by the way they're on the garment. Now, your oil stain will almost make a cross. It will follow the woof and the warp threads. Then the shape, the lipstick, blood, grass, tar, and those things, you determine those by the color. And now perfume, you hold it up and make a smell, and you'll get an odor. Now perfume and toilet waters and any alcohol-based cosmetics will take the color out of a garment if it's left on there invariably. You want to remove those immediately, and even then, sometimes it won't help. When that garment goes through the dry cleaning and you have left some kind of a cosmetic stain with an alcohol base on there, or an alcohol-based drink, it will take the color out of your garments. And you blame your dry cleaner, but it really isn't the dry cleaner's fault. It is the action that the stain that you've gotten on there has caused with your dye. So you want to be very careful. And now in location, we call this the gravy area and men's ties, because they invariably will drop spaghetti, they'll drop ketchup, they'll drop gravy. And so we just have a little steam gun in the cleaning plants where we always spray the gravy area. And that takes care of our water-soluble soils. Now, we will go from there to draperies and curtains. Now, draperies are an expensive item, and you really must use very good care to select the actual drapery for the position in the house you're going to have it. If you're going to put it in a wall where the sun it's exposed to the sun a lot, you are going to get some color loss. And you're going to lose that when it goes through the dry cleaning. Now, many, many years ago, antique satins, we would suggest that you clean those regularly, and not put them on a west wall. Put them on your east wall, your south wall, north wall, where you will not get so much sunlight exposure, because acetates antique satin will rot, it will fade, it will get color streaks, and there isn't a great deal that we can do about removing the loss of colors or turning yellow in the home, because we have a great many more problems to combat these days with air conditioning, gas heat. They will create a chemical that will fall onto that curtain, and it will create a chemical problem within itself, like hydrogen peroxide. We have some yellow curtains, and if you can't live without them with yellow flowers in them, then these problems will happen, and then when those are cleaned, sometimes your yellow flowers will drop out because of the sulfuric content that it takes to make a yellow flower. And it isn't often that it happens, but when it does, you cannot believe that this has happened to you. Now, on our draperies, you can have them cleaned every year, or you can let them hang for about 2 or 3 years. There's a woman called us about some drapes the other day. They were 10 years old, and I said, I believe I'd just leave them up and let them fall apart and forget them, because their useful life was over. And chances are, when they went through the dry cleaning, the fibers would fall out, and then we'd have an unhappy customer. So this is where we take draperies, bedspreads. Now, bedspreads have been creating a lot of problem when they had curtains to match. You always want to clean a bedspread and curtains to match at the same time. Because of the dye, the top dye will float off, then your bedspread will not be the same color as your curtain if you have not cleaned it at the same time. Most of your bedspreads have been pre-shrunk. But then many, many times, if you have bought a bedspread that is made specially for you, you want to be sure that it's been pre-shrunk, or it will not fit that particular bed. It'll shrink in length and in width sometimes. Most of the time, they will not. Pigment print is a problem with spreads. The dye lot will not go through the back, and you have top dye, and it'll float off. So we usually take bedspreads and curtains at customer risk. Leather has been a high fashion news now for about 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And leather is it's a second-hand garment. The animal has used it first. And a lot of times that animal is not always careful that he goes through the barbed wire fence, he wallows in the mud, or he gets shot at if he's out in the open and a deer or something. And so the tanner will fill those holes with lead or with a filler. And then he'll put a lacquer on them, and your leather garment's going to look beautiful in that showcase and in the store when you bring it. Then you're going to have it dry cleaned. Well, those lead fillers will come out, and there's no way we can put them back in. Now, a barbed wire will show up, and most of the time our leather garments will clean very well, but sometimes they're not very satisfactory, and this will be the fault of the manufacturer to start with. Now, we'll have what we call belly wrinkles. Lots of times they'll put them in areas where they're not noticeable, but those belly wrinkles will come from the cow belly or the hog belly, and they will always have a tendency to gather around there. So when you buy a leather garment, be sure that you check to see that you don't have belly wrinkles where they're going to give you a problem after they're cleaned. We have discussed the soil removals and our chemical finishes. Now, proper storage. Fur coats will need to be stored in a vault, but with air conditioning these days, coats do not need refrigeration as such. They only need the type of temperature that they've been used to. But they do need air and oxygen, and most of us will take our fur coats to a vault to be stored for the summer months. But for many, many years, I thought that all furs had to be below 32 degrees. Well, lots of those animals come from hot weather climes, and so you really just take into consideration the animal habitat of where the fur came from. But fur needs special care. It needs to be cleaned and glazed about every 2 or 3 years. And so, but those are special items. Now, let's take up some of the quality standards that we're supposed to have at professional dry cleaners. There shouldn't be any odor of dry cleaning solvents. And the colors should be bright and garment-free of lint. Stains removed when feasible. No seam, button, pocket, or fastener impressions. No wrinkles. Pleats and creases sharp and straight. Lapels and sleeves are rolled unless creases are requested. Decorations are replaced if removed for dry cleaning. Lining finished and not hanging below outer surface. Darts and tucks pressed correctly, and even hemline. Now, many of your hemlines these days are on the bias, and they will stretch as they're hanging. So what you really want to do is learn to properly press a bias skirt and keep it on even hemline. You start from the waist down and pin your side so that if it came in, be sure it came in even. Many seamstresses will not have a proper hanging hemline to start with. Now, on discussing, for many years we only had the natural fibers. We had woolen, we had silk, we had cotton, and we had linen. Now, we're having Ramie now, and Ramie has enjoyed a really big fashionable news this year. So Ramie will clean just like linen. It presses just like linen, only it doesn't press as easily and give you as smooth a finish as linen will. Linen will lose its color because there again you have a solid state fiber and the dye sits on the surface. The silk is the same way. It's a solid state fiber. Your man-made fibers, and of course the generic terms is what you want to be accustomed to because there are many trademark terms. But the generic terms of acrylic, and your acrylic is one of they make a lot of sweaters of, and they use it mixed. And steam and heat is its natural enemy. It will dry clean or it will wash, but not a lot of mechanical action. You don't want to leave it in a washing machine and let it whirl around because that way it will stretch while wet. Then your nylon is a trade name. It's also a generic term because it's been used that way for so many years. Nylon is almost indestructible. For many years they couldn't dye it, but then they learned to dye it in the dope stage, and it's a glutinous mass before it was extruded into the spinneret to make the fiber. So you really have a good color and a good fiber in your nylon. Your acetate and your rayon was your first practically man-made fibers made from the wood pulp of a tree and other vegetable sources. And it was first, it just stretched. There was not much you could do with rayon. It just simply was not a stable fiber. But now then, since it's been a regenerated rayon fiber, it is an excellent fiber, will hold its shape, will clean, give up its stain, and really works very well. So what you want to learn to do is to distinguish between the man-made fibers, because they yield to a different type of stain removal, and your natural fibers, and then, of course, your wood pulp and vegetable fibers. For a while, I thought they were kind of really working us over and staying up nights to see how they could create problems for the dry cleaning industry. But it's slowed down for now, and we really have a great many fibers that are excellent to work with. They accept their dyes, hold their shapes, and they professionally dry clean very well, and a lot of them will wash very well. But the main thing you must remember, never clean a garment until you've read the care label on it, because the manufacturer is the one that really knows what's in that fiber to start with. We have been talking along for quite some time about the fabric industry. And to me, fashion is the fastest moving industry in the world. And the one who gets there first with the newest is the one that reaps that golden nugget of profit. And therefore, if you're going into the mercantile business, you're going into the manufacturing business, you're going into the designer business, you need to learn your craft really well to know the background. Many, many designers have gotten into this thing because they had a knack for dressing my lady and making a fashion that's a fad. But what we really need to do is to build our wardrobes around the basic fibers, the basic dyes, and then utilize our accessories to give us color and to coordinate the type of things that we have. We really want to, we don't wear our satins and things into the kitchen and pick up a lot of stains and unusual spots, but many, many women do. We've been in a slack era. We have worn pantsuits for many, many years. Now we're gone back into the skirts and blouses. I am pretty sure that you all, as students, are going to be getting a lot of the different types of dresses and evening dresses. We're going back into an era where we're going to be really fancy and wear a lot of ruffles and pleats. We're going to be wearing shoulder pads again. You'll have to learn how to do that. And you'll have to learn how to create and press a sack dress, not stretch it out of shape. So what you need to do is learn how a garment looks. Unpressed pleats, we don't want to press them. And there's so many fascinating facets to the fabric industry and a professional dry cleaning industry that you are dealing with the most emotional parts of the human being. And so you really want to understand people and understand their clothing and understand the fads and the classic wardrobes that we have in the 1980s. Thank you.
I think we're going square dancing, right?
Yeah.